And from under $1 billion in 1998 to over $100 billion in 2012, the Indian IT industry has been a poster child of post-reform liberalized India. Industry body NASSCOM has played a pivotal role in nurturing the growth of the sector, and today its membership accounts for 95% of the industry's revenues. So as NASSCOM completes 25 years, India's tech industry will have to reposition and re-engineer itself to maintain its relevance and its dominance. In 2020, NASSCOM sees the industry touching $300 billion in revenues, but this milestone won't be a reality if Indian companies adopt a business-as-usual approach. The next wave of growth will have to be driven by innovation, higher value-added services, and non-linear growth. To talk about the opportunities and the challenges of the next 25 years, joining us today are Chandrasekhar, the president of NASSCOM, Som Mittal, the former president of NASSCOM, and Kiran Karnik, the former president of NASSCOM. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here, and congratulations to all of you on celebrating this important milestone for NASSCOM as you turn 25. You know, this takes me back to the headlines that were created when Devang Mehta, who of course was the poster boy of NASSCOM, talked about broadband Bharat and talked about the digital dream, and we still have the same slogan that we're pushing in this country. Mr. Chandrasekhar, you know, let me start by asking you about that. The slogan remains the same. I mean, yes, we have seen India change. We've seen internet become a reality, almost 300 million active internet users. The mobile revolution has taken over, but the slogans pretty much still remain the same, don't they?
Well, the slogan certainly remains the same, but the aspiration level has certainly gone up hugely. The awareness of, you know, what it can bring, and the glimpses of the transformation which are already there with us today have, I think, made that tantalizingly real. And therefore, I think today we are in a much better position to appreciate not only what this goal means, but also what it is like to experience some of the fruits of that. We are seeing that every day around us.
But what was it really like, Som Mittal, putting the Indian IT industry together? NASSCOM, as I pointed out, has played a pivotal role in organizing the Indian IT industry. The biggest advantage was that the government didn't come in your way, and that perhaps has been the biggest role that the government could have played, was to stay out of the way as far as the Indian IT industry was concerned. But what was it like?
Well, you know, I must first say that the government did play a very positive role. So I remember in 1999-2000 that you mentioned, we used to have a big antenna. We had only 126 kbs of connectivity, 128, and now you have fiber running, so fiber may not have reached the villages. So I think there has been a lot of stuff that the government did, but more than that, I think it's just been the sheer numbers. This is a people-based industry. We need to ensure that the skills are available, 24/7 operations. It has to be mission critical. And then the technological changes that kept happening. So it's been quite a ride, I would say, but I think the industry has done really well by keeping up to it. And NASSCOM had to play a major role because, you know, the policies and so on are very difficult to keep pace with the change in technology. So I think for us, whether it was fighting...
And more so today, I mean, you know, the pace of innovation is far ahead of regulation. We're seeing it as far as the challenges that the shared economy is throwing up at this point in time, the Ubers of the world. You know, so the pace of regulation continues to be far behind the curve as far as innovation is concerned.
So the main thing that happened is that I think over the years, we've been able to, as NASSCOM, position it as a very trustworthy body representing all segments, one single voice, people who compete, collaborate.
The product guys complain about that. The product guys always complain about that.
Yes, so they would be, but I think we've done well. There is always a case of so, and more the merrier, right, people who work together. But I think the fact is that we did work together, and I think we have a seat on the table, not only in India, but also internationally on issues that we have faced. So that all has helped, but it's been quite a ride, and I would say, and Kiran would probably be able to add more, I think we have seen huge downturns. We had crisis of various kinds. Outsourcing became an issue globally. But in all these things, I think industry is well positioned. There is no talk that can happen about IT, BPM, engineering services.
Without India.
Without India.
Yeah. Mr. Karnik, you know, you want to dwell on some of the challenges that you faced while you were steering NASSCOM. And those were challenging times when the outsourcing debate had become such a hugely politicized debate. It continues to be so, but India was really front and center when it came to the entire outsourcing debate, and then, of course, the financial crisis.
Well, you know, it's a nice thing to be a target because that means you're important and because you're big. But you're right, we went through, and my question used to be, what's today's crisis?
Yeah.
Because we used to have one every day. But, as Som just said, the role of NASSCOM has been critical in this. I don't want to overplay it, but it's been phenomenal, because whether you look at the outsourcing backlash, as it was called, from the US, whether you look at one data leak somewhere that makes the headlines everywhere, including the Wall Street Journal, we had to take action to make sure that the industry as a whole was secure and projected an image of being trustworthy, of being reliable, of producing quality. And I think that's something that NASSCOM helped to put together.
Mr. Chaudhary, let me get you to put on your former DOT secretary or government hat and talk about what the role the government can play as we look at touching that next milestone, the $300 billion by 2020 milestone that NASSCOM is putting forward as a projection. There's a lot of talk about smart cities, digital India, so on and so forth. And of course, the export opportunity continues, though the uncertainty as far as global growth is concerned does scare and worry us or make us nervous every day. But what is the role that you now see the government playing as we talk about the next 25?
It's very important for the government to take a balanced view on what can be done by the private sector and what is best done by the private sector and leave it to them. But there will be areas where the government has to step in and supplement this. For example, if you look at the optical fiber infrastructure, then there are many areas where the optical fiber infrastructure doesn't present a good business case today. So if government wants to lead this revolution, then it has to also play its role in leveraging. So would you say
an infrastructure will really be the government's domain or ought to be the government's domain?
That's one part. I'm only saying even in infrastructure, telecom itself is infrastructure. But a lot of it has been done by the private sector. But a very carefully discriminated approach of stepping in precisely those areas where the private industry would not be doing it because the business case doesn't
Would you
exist.
say, and I'm digressing a bit, but would you say it makes sense for the government now once and for all to decide what they want to do with MTNL and BSNL and actually spend that money on setting up networks, setting up the backbone, the infrastructure, and let the private guys deal with this stuff?
If you look at, the spread of the optical fiber, and if you look at taking this infrastructure down to the villages, the fact of the matter today is that more than half, in fact close to 2/3 of the optical fiber infrastructure in the rural areas happens to be with the BSNL. And therefore they have followed government policies to push infrastructure into certain areas. It has not been purely by business calculations alone. So while, of course, how you deal with them and whether you privatize it or not are questions which need to be grappled with, in the current situation, it is also useful sometimes to have an instrument like that which is available to push infrastructure into such far-flung areas where it's not going by commercial forces alone. So connectivity is only one part of the whole story. The other one which you referred to earlier, I think is critical, which is the regulatory piece. And we've seen already in areas like e-commerce, in the examples like Uber and so on, how the regulatory framework sometimes
do we need an independent regulator?
I don't think that this is a question of needing another super regulator. We've probably got enough regulators as it is. But the fact is that when you migrate into a digital economy, there are many laws which become outdated. And therefore they need to be reviewed. Whether you are looking at, in a case like Uber, for example, how commercial vehicles are licensed and how they are used. And many of the laws end up becoming impediments to that digital future. I think what needs to be ensured is that the regulatory framework doesn't become an independent, that you recognize where these impediments are early. And that is where, again, a body like NASSCOM and the IT industry has to play a role in helping to look at some of these issues and helping to solve them as well.
But so, Mittal, do you believe that, for instance, e-commerce, if you look at 2014, the lion's share of the money that's come in, whether it's from venture capital funds or it's from private equity, has gone into e-commerce companies, and not just e-commerce services companies, but also e-commerce product companies. And yet the government refuses to acknowledge the fact that you need to clear up the system as far as regulations are concerned. Indian companies are being forced to headquarter out of Singapore and so on and so forth. And these are first-generation entrepreneurs who've seen phenomenal growth in the last 10 years. Do you feel hopeful that there will be a realization that, more needs to be done? On one level, we talk about the ease of doing business, and then on the other, we complicate matters like this.
And you're right. So I think the political reality of why, I think it's a political issue. E-commerce is happening, and FDI is coming in one way or the other, right? It's a question of B2B versus B2C and so. But, and this whole thing about many companies, in fact, you know that many companies, international companies that used to have board meetings in India don't have it anymore because somebody says this is called permanent establishment, so you can't take decisions here. So I think all these archaic laws have to change now. And you don't need a regulator. I think this is very simple stuff. I think we went overboard in terms of our tax activism, if I will call it. And I think it put us behind many, many years. So we want more people to come and see what's happening in India. India has a promise, and we can deliver on it. So I clearly see, but you know, we have hope, as all of us would.
That economic reality and political reality will be more aligned this time around.
Yeah, it has to be, and you know, stars are aligned at this point of time like never before. And if we can't do it now, we probably can't ever. And I think we have opportunities both globally. We haven't yet opened up our markets fully to Japan and China, right? We have opportunities within the country. We have small companies that we need to support. So there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done.
I'll talk about each of those issues. But Mr. Karnik, you know, since we are talking about the next wave of growth as far as Indian IT is concerned and the domestic opportunity, while so far it's been a sort of, you know, small piece of the pie, so to speak, but with this government's efforts to move towards smart India and so on and so forth, you know, perhaps the domestic opportunity can play an important part. We also heard from the governor, RBI governor, saying that Make for India should be as important as Make in India, because let's not ape China, let the consumption story be domestic driven. In that context, how do you really see the domestic IT story panning out?
Well, I'm very excited about the domestic IT story for two reasons. First, I think the contribution that IT can make within the country for all kinds of things, both for business efficiency, competitiveness, efficiency, but also very importantly for basic social issues like education and health is phenomenal. But the good thing is that unlike in many other areas, what you make in and for India is equally applicable, maybe with some bells and whistles added, and maybe changing the rupee sign to a dollar sign, equally applicable outside. If we can build products because we can interface with consumers here much more easily, because we can test betas, we get a chance to go back and forth. Somebody hopefully is willing to take a chance saying this guy is next door, he'll fix it if it goes wrong, and helps him to develop good things like products. Then that can go into the world market. So the expertise that you build here on the Indian market is not just limited to what you do in India, but that enables you to have a springboard to go outside the country. And therefore there's a dual benefit of both serving India and getting out into the world and making good money. I think that's very, very exciting. And the new opportunities coming up with broadband, which Shekhar mentioned, cloud, which gives you all kinds of new things to be able to do, and the fact that you're a mobile platform in this country at a huge scale is, I think, a phenomenal convergence of possibilities. And add to that, you know, things like the UID platforms, the banking inclusion platform where you have common numbers. I think you're opening up new possibilities altogether to both serve the country and then to take that expertise and what you've developed there to productize services and take them to the rest of the world in a big, big way.
On that note, it's time for us to take a break. When we return, we continue our conversation as NASSCOM turns 25.